All right, welcome to Becoming Uncommon. I'm Coach Richardson, and when we talk about becoming uncommon, we have to realize that there's so many different twists and turns. Our journey is going to take so many different routes, and sometimes we don't know what they're going to be. And we like to talk to leaders and industry individuals that, have taken these leadership roles and these uncommon journeys, but then also being able to step outside the mold and think outside the box and be able to lead and guide and be able to do things that might seem a little unorthodox at the time and being able to take that step. And so with me, I have Aron McGuire, CEO of USA Bobsled Skeleton. And from there, Aron, go ahead and introduce yourself for us.
Yeah, thanks, Chris. Thanks for including me on the podcast here. Certainly excited to talk with you. Aron McGuire, like you said, CEO of USA Bobsled Skeleton, and we're a bit of a small organization, so wear a lot of different hats. But it's been quite the journey to get to where I am today, and certainly one that's been challenging and rewarding. And yeah, looking forward to talking with you a little bit more today.
Yeah, definitely. So just so everybody knows, like kind of going back, I first met Aron, when I was doing the U20, I was a junior coming into track and field as a decathlete, and he spoke to our little group and he talked about, yeah, I was a decathlete and I went into bobsled. And I'm like, there's that doesn't seem like, but then he talked about like what I really got from that, at least introduction at that time, being in college, is that you applied some of your physical attributes to be able to compete, and also the speed, strength, and power associated with it, and be able to create that linkage. And so just off the top, when you made that transition from being a decathlete to going into bobsled, what were some of those like things and it ran through your mind initially?
Well, hopefully you saw the movie Cool Running, so that
Oh
transition
yeah, yeah, yeah.
wasn't too
Yeah.
surprising to you. And so you're right. Most athletes don't grow up being a bobsled athlete. There's two tracks in the United States, Lake Placid, New York, and Park City, Utah. And so really you build a track because you're going to host an Olympic Games. And very few athletes, unless you grew up in one of those two towns, those two cities, have never touched a bobsled in their lives until they're 22 or 23 years old. And so most bobsled athletes who are successful really come from what we call talent transfer. And really they have a passion or a love of a different sport, and they're athletic people. And so a lot of the athletes that we have that compete in the sport of bobsled have come from track and field, have come from football. They played soccer, they played baseball, they played softball. And so I joke that when we're recruiting athletes, we're looking for big people that can run fast and push heavy objects and aren't afraid to go down a track at 90 miles an hour. And it seems simple, but it's not overly complicated. And really our biggest challenge is raising awareness. And there is an Olympic gold medal bobsled team sitting out there somewhere in the United States that doesn't even know that the sport of bobsled or skeleton is an opportunity for them. And so, that's what happened to me. I was a decathlete. Went to the University of Akron in Ohio, and a decent D1 athlete, but never going to make an Olympic team or national team in track and field. And was introduced and just kind of came across it, and really it was a calendar that I had. It was an Olympic calendar, and every month was a different sport. So track and field was one sport, table tennis was another, archery was another, and it just turned out that bobsled was one of the sports that was featured on the calendar. And I thought, that's kind of interesting. I wonder how one becomes a bobsledder. And so I kind of assumed that people just grow up being a bobsledder. So I called up
Yeah.
the national governing body and just a cold call and said, how do you become a bobsledder? And they explained to me about the talent transfer and how they look for other athletes, athletes who had played other sports that wanted to potentially make that transition in the sport of bobsled. And so I explained to them my background, and there was interest there. And they said, why don't you come out to Lake Placid to the Olympic Training Center? And we have what's called a rookie camp, and it's a week long. And we teach you the basics of how the sport works, what's involved, how to push a sled. They actually this was in the middle of summer, so there was a bobsled on wheels on a track that went down a hill that kind of mirrored what a typical start of a bobsled race would be like. And they taught us the fundamentals of how to push a sled and how to get in. what to do if you don't get in and you fall and roll and have to get yourself up and dust yourself off and try it again. And how the sport works internationally, what the process is from going from being a rookie and never touching a sled up to making the national team and competing around the world. And so I went out to Lake Placid and had a tremendous experience. And at the time decided, no, I want to spend the next few years of my life. And this was just after the 2002 Olympic Games. And the US had success. And that was fresh in my mind of watching bobsled during the games. And so I said, I want to give this a shot. And I was actually supposed to be at the time a high school science teacher. So my undergraduate is in secondary education with a minor in physics. So in a parallel universe, I'm supposed to be teaching high school earth science, physics, chemistry, those types of things. And so this opportunity opened up my eyes to what else I could be doing. And so decided to dedicate the next few years of my life. And I went from going to that rookie camp, being inspired to eventually making the national team and competing at World Cup and World Championship events for 3 seasons and representing the United States and Italy, Germany, Switzerland, France, Austria, Canada, and the United States. And had a tremendous experience. Missed the Olympic team, but you know, built solid, amazing friendships with athletes I still stay in contact with. Had the opportunity to wear a uniform that's red, white, and blue that said United States. Got to see parts of the world I never thought I'd see. And so look back at that experience as a positive one that set me up for an opportunity moving forward, and one that changed my trajectory of potentially being a high school teacher to saying, I want to continue to be part of Olympic and Paralympic sport as a next step in my career.
Wow. So when you look back, so like before we get too much into, kind of your trajectory there, who are some mentors as you think about that initial transition or going into the new sport? Who are some individuals that maybe help guide you or mentor you or at least kind of showed you the ropes to help you feel confident enough to pursue this kind of uncharted path?
Well, one of the guys, and you may actually know him or know of him. There's a set of twins, Dan and Darren Steele, who were
Mhm.
both decathletes. And so
Okay.
I had met Dan Steele at one point, and so I reached out to him, and I knew that he had had success in the games. They both had success, and Dan was an Olympic medalist from 2002, and so reached out to him and just started understanding before I went to that rookie camp in Lake Placid. So I remember standing, I can visually, vividly visualize where I was standing, on the side of the road outside of my apartment, talking to him for about an hour and just asking him questions about, how does one get into the sport? What are we going to do during rookie camp? What should I be prepared for? And really understanding what I was getting myself into. And so he was a mentor, even though we probably spent an hour and a half on the phone. He really gave me some insights into what to expect when I arrived and what the sport was like. And so he was a mentor, and certainly we have coaches who are still involved. Tuffy Latour was one of the coaches. Brian Scheimer, who's one of the coaches that were coaching me and are still coaching athletes. And so they were great mentors for not only what to expect and how to best perform in competition, but really how to leverage that experience to set yourself up for success after that athletic career.
Hmm. Because it seems kind of scary, right? Like, kind of taking that leap of faith, going into kind of uncharted territory. But, once you kind of gotten through that, like, what was your transition like from being, quote unquote, like a full-time vested athlete to, going into the professional realm? What was that transition, or where do you think you made that transition? Uh, Transition between going from a full-time athlete to where you started your kind of professional career and things like that and what that transition was like.
Yeah, so that transition is often a tough one for athletes because you finish up and you either get injured, don't make the team, get cut, don't make the team, or it's very rare that an athlete's at the top of their game and they just say, "Hey, I'm great. I'm going to move on to the next step." And so for me, I was trying out for the 2006 Olympic Games and missed the team, and so really had a choice to make. Do I want to stick around and do the sport for 4 more years? And at that point, I was very proud of what I had accomplished. And on the other hand, I recognized that I wanted to get into a professional career, and so made the conscious choice to step into a professional career. And so was fortunate enough to have done some work with USA Track and Field at the time, and a position opened up that was the national teams manager for USA Track and Field, and I was really responsible for coordinating the logistics and operations of getting U.S. athletes from the United States over to compete at the Pan American Games, to go to world championships, indoor world championships, outdoor world championships, junior events, and eventually the Olympic Games. And so for me, I really leveraged my experience that I had in the sport of bobsled to kind of get my foot in the door and showcase that I was potentially the best candidate for the role. And so oftentimes I talk to athletes, and you talk to a bobsled athlete that's making that transition after their athletic career, and you ask them about, what did you learn? And they talk about, well, prepping the sled, we drove around Europe, and I had to share a car with my teammates, and spent hours working on runners, on the bottom of the sled. And you say, yeah, you did all that, but you were also learning teamwork, how to work within a group for a common goal. You learned international experience, driving around Europe. You learn how to be an expert in a craft of some sort. And those are all transferable skills. And so for me, I was able to leverage to say, look, I'm finishing up being an athlete, traveling around the world. I know what the challenges are like. And when you travel around the world, when you have stresses, when you have distractions, when you have things that you're worried about, those are all taking away from your ability to perform at the very best you can. And so for me, I really leaned into that experience and was able to articulate that, if I'm chosen to step into this role, my goal would be to provide and create a positive supportive environment for athletes, and really put them in the best environment possible for them to compete at their highest level. And so, while I didn't necessarily know everything about the role and every aspect of it, you never do. And so you have to go in with that growth mindset of, I bring a certain set of experience and knowledge that will be beneficial to the role, but I also know that I'm going to ask a lot of questions and be curious, and learn along the way, and figure out ways to make the process, make the role, make the experience that much better from year to year for everybody.
Yeah, because I noticed that a lot of student athletes or just athletes in general don't realize the level of grit and adaptability they develop from, their pursuits as an athlete, that is like so valuable in any realm of like professional career path you want to go, just because most people don't get those real life experiences because like, yeah, if you don't handle adversity well as an athlete, you're not going to ascend, you're not going to grow, you're not going to experience success. Like it is a determining factor of success at that level. And that capacity is so valuable. Yeah, I think that's so important to help athletes realize that you're learning skills, you're learning transferable traits to help you whatever career path you want to go in. But as we go into, as you kind of make that transition to USA Track and Field, that's I think another time when we connected was you're hosting Thorpe Cup. And I don't know if I told you this story, so I'm gonna go ahead and share this here. Is so we're at Thorpe Cup and I reached out to you. I don't know how we connected. I think I was on a team like not too recently and or not too that long ago. And I found out you're hosting Thorpe at Chula Vista, I think at the time.
Mhm.
And I was like, hey, I'm free, I'll help out. and I'm just getting into coaching, right? And I just think I was just hired at Cerritos. And so I come down, I'm helping, and you're like, Manny Batista's the guy, he's gonna help you, okay? Like, or he's kind of running this and that, and just ask him what he needs or whatever for help. And so I'm like, all right, Manny, I'm here to help you. He goes, come here real quick. And he goes, Chris, I know you are, you're at Cerritos, you're doing a good job, but we're the volunteers are the lifeblood of this and that. And he kind of like no one's ever talked to me like that before. And I'm like, whoa, like, and I then he started saying something and he goes, we're at like, the volunteers and this, and like we get the job done. And I started smiling and I'm like, that's exactly what Aaron said. And he goes, all right, good. And let me introduce you to John Green. And so I got
Yeah.
Green, but I mean, for you to be able to kind of offer that opportunity, just for me to be a grunt, just to kind of go around like that was life changing for me just because one, I got to experience, kind of high level track and field, from the behind the scenes. Also, you allowed me to be in some of the technical meetings, just kind of be a fly on the wall and all those things. Like I was able to learn so much that this sport is deeper than maybe anything that I've experienced, especially as an athlete. And so, but with that being said, as your role as at USA Track and Field and international teams, how did that maybe lead you to, your first role at the USOPC?
Well, first of all, that's a great story. And thank you for sharing that with me. And I think a
Oh,
lot of times, I was in that moment. There's so much going on. You're just trying to get things done. And so Manny, obviously, when you talk about mentors, Manny was a mentor of mine. And so one of my first experiences was helping out with the team in 2003 in the Pan American Games, and he was one of the team managers there. And he's still continues to be a great friend. In fact, I got together with him just a few weeks ago here in Colorado. And so, he what he said is absolutely important, is absolutely spot on, is that, doesn't matter whether you're the volunteer or a manager or a paid staff member or the CEO, everybody is valuable and everybody is critical to, whether it's within an organization or a business or executing on an event like that. So, my first introduction within USA Track and Field was being a volunteer. And so, everybody starts somewhere, and whether you have experience as an athlete or not. And, being a volunteer is a great way to get that experience, make those connections, and whether it's changing industries or growing within an industry, I'll tell you, I still volunteer at events. And so that's rewarding. And so that's incredibly important. And so, kudos to you and thank you for raising your hand and reaching out to be a volunteer there. So that's incredible.
Yeah, no, it was fun. No, it was a trip. It was cool because like even now, like I've been fortunate enough to be on, I think like 6 to 7 Team USA staffs. And most recently there was the head of the World Juniors. And like I said, some of those lessons I learned as relates to the professionalism and like the level of like accuracy you have to have as it relates to like scheduling and logistics and everything. Like I picked all that up from there and it just kind of, helped build. And I feel that we had a successful U20s last year, and being the head coach for the men's team, like again, I think back to those moments, like that all helped prepare me to be, the best, support staff I could possibly be at the time. So no, I definitely appreciate that.
Well, that's great. And I think that, what that does is that builds the foundation of what you do. And I think
Mhm.
that kind of talks to your next question about my transition going from track and field to my next step, which was with the US Olympic and Paralympic Committee.
Mhm.
And so one of the things I consciously did and intentionally did during my time at USA Track and Field was to gain as much experience as I possibly could. And so was always looking for ways that we could improve the process or improve the organization or improve how we did things. And there were oftentimes situations where someone would come to me and say, or come to the group and say, hey, we need someone to take the lead on this. And the Thor Cup was a perfect example. I don't know that prior to my involvement, the person in that role really led the Thorpe Cup. It was organized and run by somebody else. And USA Track and Field kind of asked the leadership, asked kind of general, is anybody interested in getting involved in leading this event? And I, obviously had the connection to the decathlon. And I said, yeah, I'd love to. And there were other people in the room that were saying, well, I don't get paid to do that. I'm not going to do that. And to me, I saw that as an opportunity to learn and grow. And so for me, when we talk to, give advice or make a recommendation to people that are getting involved, I would say try and do as much as you possibly can, because you're going to be faced with challenges. You're going to be faced with opportunities, experiences that are all going to be that foundation, that knowledge base that eventually you're gonna look back on, and that's going to help you make the smart decisions, the right decisions moving forward. And if you don't have that experience base, that knowledge base, then you're making decisions with more limited information. And so, while it's extra work and it's weekend work and it's late nights, it all pays off, and it's all things that you learn from, whether they work well or they don't work well or don't go according to plan, but you learn about it and you figure out how to do it better next time.
Mhm.
And so I did have the opportunity to be part of the support team that took the Team USA to the 2008 Olympic Games in Beijing. And then I was fortunate to be part of the team that took the staff that took the team to 2012 Games in London. And during that time, I knew that I wanted to grow within sport. And I think during my experience at track and field, I said, I want to stay involved in sport. And so I went back and got my MBA through Indiana University, because I wanted to balance out my experience with some classroom knowledge, and that helped set me up for the next step, and that was the director of the Olympic and Paralympic Training Center in Colorado Springs. And so while I was having an amazing experience with track and field, I was on the road for 4 or 5 months, sometimes 6 months out of the year, which is amazing to see, to go to Asia, to go to the Middle East, to go to Africa, to Central South America and Europe. But I was getting to a point where I was getting a bit burned out from all the travel. But I still really enjoyed what I did. And so the opportunity, the position as a director of the Colorado Springs Olympic and Paralympic Training Center opened up, and I saw a very clear transition, step, doing the same things of creating an environment that's positive, that's safe, that's supportive for athletes to really focus on what they want to accomplish and accomplish their goals. And so instead of supporting a world championship team around the world, or Olympic Games, or Pan Am team, it was essentially the same concept, but it was stationary in Colorado Springs. And so applied for the role, was offered the role, and moved from Indiana to Colorado, and was in that role for about 6 years, and really overseeing in Colorado Springs. It's a 36-acre complex. It's like a small university where you have housing, you've got dorms, you've got training facilities that are specific for swimming or shooting or taekwondo, and some general facilities that can be used for volleyball and basketball. But then a dining facility, transportation, and I was going from really being part of a small department to then leading a group of about 60 people, 60 staff, and about five different departments. So that was something new for me. But again, we kind of went back to my foundational philosophies of that environment, and really listening to athletes, working with national governing bodies to understand what's working well, what isn't working well, and where can we make improvements. And it really, for me, it was always the goal of whatever environment or role that I stepped into, how can I leave that role in a better place than when I initially stepped in? And how can you look back and say, okay, I had a positive impact on that role, the people who were involved in that environment.
Yeah, so like looking at your leadership style, and somebody that, obviously, for me, loving how you're, trying to be transformational, you want to think outside the box. Sometimes, and you brought this word up twice, talking about change. Change isn't always easy,
Mhm.
right? And initiating change is, sometimes could be add to controversy. So like how do you navigate, like what is your just general philosophy as it relates to navigating? Because sometimes at least I know, like when I get gung ho about something, when I'm excited about something, I want to come in guns a blazing. And sometimes people don't want to move at the pace that I want to move at. What are some strategies that relate, or at least that you've, implemented, that you found to be successful when kind of navigating adversity by trying to implement change or trying to grow and evolve?
So I would first start off with saying change isn't always a good thing.
Mm.
And that being said, I've seen people that step into a role and they're like, I need to make changes. I need to prove myself, and I need to kind of leave my imprint here. And a lot of times they're just changing things for the sake of change, and it's not impactful. It's not necessarily taking a situation and improving it. They're just taking a situation and changing it, and spend a lot of time and energy doing a lot of activity, but without positive change. And so for me, it's understanding what is, first of all, what needs to be changed. And really that starts with listening and asking questions. Who are all the key stakeholders? Who's involved? How is this environment? Who's it impacting? And then asking the questions of what's working well and what isn't, and where are the problems? Where are the issues? And looking for those consistencies, or those commonalities. A lot of times you'll have one person in a room who has a very, very strong, loud voice, but they may be an outlier. And so, really need to think about, is that
Mm.
change necessary, or is that really just one person who's a great advocate? And so to me, it's about how do we make the biggest impact? Where is there an issue or a problem? And then leaning in to think about how do we best make that change. And like I said, really it's just is listening, understanding, and to your point, I'm the same way. I hear about something, I'm excited, and I'm like, we gotta do this. We're gonna get this thing done in 2 weeks, and then it's like 2 months later, and you're like, what's taking so long? And so change is difficult because people inherently want to go back to what they're used to, even though in a lot of cases it may not be better, it may be worse. And so it's the comfort, the confidence, the trust that by getting out of your comfort zone, or changing something, or trying something new, it's going to lead to something that's positive in the long run. And so for me, change, there's a process in the change that's it's really important to create buy-in to help accomplish that change. And so it's one thing for me to walk into a room and say, okay, here's a problem, here's how we're going to change it. Now everybody get to work. And that's not always the most successful approach that I've found. For me, it's a process of, again, getting all the key stakeholders involved, having a discussion, talking about what's the problem, getting feedback from everybody, and then finding a solution that incorporates everybody's feedback, and ensuring that solution takes parts from everybody who's been involved. And I feel that as that process, goes, if the people who are involved have a say in what that solution is going to be, they're more invested in helping ensure that solution is successful in the long run. And so if you just say, hey, here's what we're going to do, people may not be that committed to making sure that ultimately is successful there. And I'd
Right.
say the last thing is the timing of that change. And one of the things that I've always found is important is that it's always great to have near-term goals, midterm goals, and long-term goals. Because if you're only looking at those long-term goals, you start to lose that momentum. That's all part of the big accomplishments. And I often think about home projects, and I've been guilty of this. Right, when I look at my home, I buy a new home or move into a new home, I'm like, oh, the kitchen needs updates. I got some landscaping to do, need to do some changes within the bathroom, and want to paint the living room. And 6 months
Mm.
later, I've got 6 projects that are 80% done. And I'm just like, oh, I'm never gonna get this done. And I lose that momentum. But if I realize that, okay, let me just prioritize these, and let's focus on the yard and the bathroom and the kitchen. And okay, I'm gonna knock the yard out in the weekend. The bathroom's gonna take 2 weeks, and the kitchen's gonna take a month. Then I can be ticking things off the list, checking them off the list, and saying, okay, I got some momentum, I got this done, and it certainly helps with the long-term change that might in some cases take months and sometimes even years.
Hmm. Yeah, because like that's what I just think back, like you said, the home improvement one, like I said, you kind of struck a chord there, so I'm gonna stay off that one. But like looking at, just trying to just initially like what were some of those, do you have any examples or stories like from whether it's USATF or any part of within your journey within USOPC, just that like where you want to implement change and like maybe you're thinking unorthodox or out of the box and it went better than expected or how as you expected? Anything that stands out to you, like projects or?
Well, I think a big one is in bobsled. There's really three components that you need to be successful. Um, One is you got to have a fast start,
Mm,
and then the second is you got to have a pilot that can drive really well down the track, and the third is equipment, and you have the ability to build your own equipment, build your own sleds. And so when I stepped into my role, we had been essentially we'd been using old sleds and purchasing sleds from Europe. And when you purchase sleds, you're only going to you're only going to have a sled that's as fast as everybody else.
mm,
And so the US had had some success in the past building their own sleds. And so um, recognized that early on that if we want to be successful as a country, we have amazing athletes, but we need to make sure that we have the equipment that can
mm.
support them. And so I'll be honest with you, you can't get on Target, or you can't go to Target or go to Amazon or go to Dick's Sporting Goods and buy a bobsled.
Oh, okay.
There's not,
Not at Costco? You sure?
Costco's not running a sale on them.
Uh,
So it's a very unique skill set. It takes unique, very unique people with unique experience to really put all the pieces in place. You got to have someone that can design a sled. You got to have partners who can help with the carbon fiber. You got to have partners that can help with the steel chassis. You got to have partners that can help with the blades or the runners that the sled runs on. And so early on in my role with USA Bobsled Skeleton, I identified we have to do this, and that really came from feedback from our coaches and the athletes as well. And so that concept or that goal quickly rose to the top of the priority list. And so kind of systematically took our time, made sure that we had the right people in place, made sure that we had the right partners. And then eventually, after 2 or 3 years, we started really designing and building some fast sleds. But we knew it wasn't going to happen. We all hoped that it happened in the first season, but we knew reality would set in. There'd be delays, and we'd have to make changes. And so, I'd say that's an example of a project that's been successful, and it's ongoing. And so the exciting thing is we're going to have sleds that we've built over the last 3 years in the upcoming Olympic Games in 2026. And so they're performing really well, and we feel that that'll put our athletes in a competitive advantage against the rest of the world.
wow. How much is a bobsled, by the way? Like just
Yeah,
all,
if you want to buy one, nobody buys them recreationally, but they're about $125,000 or more in Europe, but then you have to ship them back. So throw another $10,000 on that for shipping. So they're in terms of expensive sports, bobsled is one of the more expensive sports. We're not talking $1 million horses in equestrian, but the cost to participate is really high. And then we have challenges that we don't necessarily have a massive membership base. So it's not like we have hundreds of thousands of bobsled or skeleton athletes that are out there that are paying membership dues. And so we really do, rely on sponsors and donors to help support the team.
wow. So what about like you say there are over 100,000? How many does US bobsled have then?
How many sleds do we have?
US
Competitively, we have about 25 two-man sleds, and then we have several four-man sleds that are competitive, and then we've got a lot of older sleds that
Oh,
we're trying to phase out.
mm,
But a lot of those have been built, and so again, it's partners who have provided their time, their materials to ultimately build sleds. Then so instead of having to spend $125,000, they're you know they're helping us build sleds at a much lower cost, which allows us to reallocate those funds to support athletes directly.
wow. So the R&D is a big part of like that next move. So because like I was just thinking out because I remember before too, you also mentioned decathletes going into NASCAR. I don't know if you remember that a while ago.
Yeah.
But is there like, I guess I think of like NASCAR, like bobsled, is there like a circuit? Like how does that work? I don't know how to phrase it, but like a competitive circuit or like a race circuit, like I'm thinking NASCAR, bobsled.
Yes, there are some commonalities or similarities, and yeah, decathletes are great at changing tires and being on the pit crew. And if you look at the recruiting efforts of NASCAR teams now, it's not so different from what we're doing, and that's talent transfer. They're looking for big, fast, powerful individuals. And so, yeah, on the bobsled circuit, there are a couple different tours. There is the North American Cup Tour, which is for development athletes. And so these are athletes that are just getting into the sport, and that's in Whistler, Park City, and Lake Placid. And then the next level up, our highest, our next competitive level is our World Cup Tour. And so that season starts in late November, goes November, December, January, February, and then early March. And that's 8 World Cup races typically. And so majority of those are in Europe, with a few in Asia and a few in North America. And then at the highest level, you have the World Championships and Olympic Games, which takes place, obviously the Winter Games takes place once every 4 years, and then there's 3 World Championships in between.
Okay, three. Then, I'm going to kind of rewind a little bit just because, as we start to wrap up, a couple things I want to kind of get your perspective on. You kind of touched on it, but it's like work-life balance. So like understanding, everybody talks about grind. You got to grind, you got to push, you got to, make the most out of everything. But so often individuals like, I would consider you a high achiever, which I would consider myself, just always wanting the next thing and wanting to grow and be the absolute best we could possibly be. Life, right? And so we're more than just the titles and the things that we do. We have lives outside of that. So how have you learned how to manage and navigate, that work-life balance?
Yeah, that's sport is definitely a lifestyle,
Mm.
and it's not a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday for the most part. I mean, there are certain roles within sport that can be a 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, but for the most part, there are competitions on the weekends. There's, late night calls, there's emails. And for me, it can be challenging, and there's certainly times that I definitely set boundaries of, okay, I'm shutting the computer down. I'm not getting to it. I'm not going to look at it unless somebody calls me. And I think it's for me it's I do recognize that our team, our staff, has families and lives as well, and so I do my best to respect that and not reach out to them unless it's an emergency, late night or on the weekend. But you really do have to balance it, and you do have to take time away, one, because there are certainly things that are important that are outside of your career. And we were talking about kids. I've got two kids and a wife who very involved with, and my wife actually works for USA Hockey, so she understands it. And we've got a little bit of a winter sport thing going around the house, but you know even though the laptop might be closed and not be doing emails, there's times I'm thinking about it. If I'm working out, if I'm, taking a walk with, walking the dog around the neighborhood, I might, that's a lot of times when the best ideas come to mind. Or, if you're in the middle of Zoom calls and you're answering emails, it's not when you're the most creative. And so a lot of issues are solved away from the computer, away from a meeting. A lot of the best ideas happen when you least expect it there. So yeah, there is I'd say that when I was first starting off and trying to get as much experience as possible, there was probably less of a work-life balance, but it was more of a focus on career and learning. And it was a great time for that. And now that I'm a little bit later in my career, I can balance it. And part of that is finding very competent people who have amazing character that you can trust, and trust and surround yourself with those people, and trust that they're going to make the right decisions, and do the right things, and reach out when something comes up and you're not quite sure of, we've got 2 options here, let's talk through it.
No. So like, because like, hearing you and what kind of having followed your career, have you ever thought about going into collegiate world and being an athletic director? Or has that ever come across your plate? Or you ever, as you're walking the dog, a quick thought or anything like that?
I have thought about that, and I did a little bit of college coaching after I was done as a decathlete, and I liked coaching. But I'll tell you, I'm really passionate about the Olympic and Paralympic movement, and for me, that passion is really stems from three areas. One is that while athletes are trying to be the best competitively as they can be, they want to score more points than the other team. They want to be faster than the other team. Being an athlete is an opportunity to be life changing. And so, as we talked about, there's so much that you learn as being an athlete that sets you up for success later on, whether it's in your career, whether it's in your community, or with your family. And it's that those skill sets that is life changing on an individual basis. Within the Olympic and Paralympic movement, you do get a chance to represent your country. And so there's a lot of national pride and knowing that you're, again, wearing a uniform that's red, white, and blue that says USA, and knowing that it's not just you out there by yourself, but it is the team of people that have been supportive of you. It's your coaches, it's your parents, it's your brother and sister, it's your wives, it's your husbands, girlfriends, boyfriends, it's your hometown that had a spaghetti dinner fundraiser to help you pay for training. And so there's that national level impact. And then for me, it's the Olympics and Paralympics is so much more than medal count and getting gold medals. It really truly is bringing the world together in a peaceful event, and it is bringing different cultures, different countries together, and really sharing and experiencing and having a positive impact on globally. And it's more than, like I said, more than just medal count, but it's a way to understand different cultures and create bridges as opposed to tear them down, and create those relationships and stay in contact with somebody from another country that you may never have thought you would meet, and find that there are a lot of things that we have in common. And to me, that does have a positive mission, and it's critically important to what we do on a global basis there.
Mm. No, that's awesome. Yeah, it's good to hear. So, or even then, now, with you talk about like the Olympic sport movement, obviously with the change in NCAA and everything that's happening in that arena, I'm sure you're, if nothing else, briefly aware of, some of the changes that are going on with NIL, transfer
Mhm.
portal, and some of these other concepts. But where do you see Olympic sports like evolving, or like what are some of the things that the state of the NCAA from your perspective?
Well, certainly we all have a fear that Olympic sport programs could go away, and we see them. A lot of them are already starting to be discontinued and stopped. So, my hope is that there's always going to be a pendulum, and while NIL is impactful right now, and there's a lot of opportunity for athletes to, in football and basketball to earn money through NIL. My hope is that there continues to be a recognition that the NCAA and the college system is a feeder system, and that's a development system into the success that Team USA has at the Olympic Games. And so my hope is that we do recognize that there needs to be a balance. And while a track program or a volleyball program may not be a revenue generator, it's the right thing to do. And sometimes we got to think less about money and think about what's the right thing to do. And so how do we ensure that as many athletes and as many students who go through the NCAA program have those opportunities, because those opportunities are bigger than just playing volleyball. They're bigger than just playing, running track and field. They're setting individuals up to have a positive impact on their community moving forward.
Yeah, definitely. So, kind of as we wrap up, I would love it if you can maybe give some piece of advice, or, what you think are some critical elements for, entering college students, understanding that their journey might not be completely mapped out right now, or at least they think they do, and not realizing that there might be some bumps and some, twists and turns along the way. What are some key advice that you would give to incoming student athletes?
Yeah, I would definitely say that be open to opportunities. I would never guess, if I were to go back and talk to myself 20 years ago, I never would have guessed I would have been, the CEO of USA Bobsled Skeleton. And I started off saying, in a parallel universe, I'm teaching high school science. And so for me, it's always been about looking at the opportunities that are out there. And while I may have a general idea of, oh, I love sports, I want to stay involved in sports, not being closed off to opportunities and looking, always being aware of what's out there, and setting yourselves up to have as many opportunities as possible. And so when I was volunteering to take on extra work at USA Track and Field, when I decided to go back and get my MBA, that wasn't because I wanted to, I want to be the CEO of a national governing body, but to say, if I don't do these things, I may have one or two options moving forward. But if I do these things, then that's going to open up 5 or 6 different opportunities. And now I can find something that works well within my timeline, and is more exciting for me, and something that's more rewarding. And so, it's all about walking through doors and making sure you have as many doors open as you possibly can.
Yeah, no, thank you. That's perfect. Just because, again, we don't know exactly what's in front of us. And one thing I definitely want to commend you on, and the USOPC, with especially with like bobsled, is that they're so open and inviting to different athletes from different backgrounds, and being able to just have them come like as they are, and just understand that just bring who you are, and we'll teach you the rest, kind of thing. It seemed like, right? Uh,
Yeah.
and so, are you guys still doing that where there's like open invites and talent identification?
For bobsled?
Mhm.
Absolutely. In fact, this weekend we've got, or this week coming up, we have a combine out in Utah to for athletes to try out, and then that eventually leads to rookie camp. So certainly, if anybody's listening and interested in trying out for the bobsled and skeleton team, go to usabs.com and click on there's a little link up there on recruiting, and so that'll give you some information on how to try out, where to try out, and what's involved.
Awesome. Well, thank you. So again, thanks for stopping by, becoming uncommon, just understanding that we might not know exactly what's in front of us, but it all things said and done, success is just one click away, one step away, one decision away. And again, thank you, Aaron, for visiting with us. And outside of that, where can they reach you, Aaron?
Well, LinkedIn. So I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn, promote the sports of bobsled and skeleton and the winter sports. So Aron McGuire on LinkedIn, and feel free to reach out. Always enjoy talking with folks, and I get random emails or messages saying, "Hey, I want to get involved in the sports industry, and do you have some time to talk?" And so, mentoring and giving back and sharing, advice is critically important. But I've been fortunate to have a number of mentors that have given me advice that have helped me be successful in my career. And so to me, it's rewarding to do the same.
Awesome. Well, all right.
Yeah.
Well, continue to be uncommon and see you guys next time. Thanks.
Great. Thank you.